In this presentation, we will continue on to part 18 of our comprehensive partnership problem, this time looking at the calculation of the cost of goods sold. Here we are on our form 1065. As we scroll through the 1065, you'll recall that we have the cost of goods sold here on line 2, cost of goods sold, and you'll see that it says attach form 1125A. So we have the 150,000. When we were taking that information from our income statement, oftentimes we don't have the detail. We might not have the detail for the cost of goods sold. We might just have its cost of goods sold. And we wanted to push forward with the return, even though we don't have the detail on it. And therefore, we pushed forward with it. And basically, the way we did that is when we enter this information into the system, into the cost of goods sold. If I jump to the data input screen, note that if there's a beginning balance, if you make the ending balance the same as the beginning balance, then whatever you put into the purchases will basically be the cost of goods sold. So we kind of forced that to work so that we could push forward without digging into, at that time, the cost of goods sold, because our focus was to get the net income. Now we're going to go back into this and think about the cost of goods sold calculation with more detail. So if we think about the cost of goods sold, if I go back to our forms up top, we're going to think about our normal, just the normal cost of goods sold kind of equation. Would be beginning inventory, and then we'd have purchases, and then we'd have less the ending inventory. And we might have a subtotal here, which would be goods available for sale, right? And then that's going to be ending inventory. So we know what the beginning inventory is because it's going to be on the prior year tax return or the prior year financial statements. So the financial statements for the prior year show the beginning inventory, prior year inventory at the 60,000. So I can pull that information over. I can say, all right, the beginning inventory is going to be equal to, let's just use formulas here. And prior year is this one. There's the 60,000. Now I may not know what the purchases are, but this is going to be this is cost of, say, cost of goods sold. All right. Purchases is what we may not know. We know the ending inventory because that's on the balance sheet too. So the ending inventory is on the current balance sheet. We know what that is. That's going to be the inventories of 50,000. And we know then the cost of goods sold is going to be equal to the beginning inventory formula plus purchases, which we don't know, minus the ending inventory. So the point is, when you do this, we're basically solving for, the purchases here. And we know that the cost of goods sold at the end of the day needs to be 150,000. So at the end of the day, this needs to be 150,000. So we're basically solving then for purchases. You don't really want to think of a whole new equation. You just want to basically put the same cost of goods sold equation and then figure out what purchases is. Now, obviously, you can write this out algebraically. You can do the algebra with it. I'm going to point out a nice tool that you can use anytime you have a situation like this. It's very useful if you start to use functions and formulas and whatnot, like time value of money functions and things like that. Anytime you have basically this is what I need to be, and I know what it needs to be this 150,000. What I'd like to ask Excel to do is to change this number to whatever it needs to be to make this one 150,000. Now, this is a fairly basic problem. We can work this problem out, but very useful when you start to use other functions. So, and what Excel will do is it'll just basically start testing things like, oh, what if I put 1 there? All right, that doesn't make. What if I put 500? That there. What if I put 100? That, right? It'll start testing things just like you would if you were just going to try to test it out. So the way to find that in Excel, useful feature, I'll put my cursor down below somewhere, be in the data file. We'll go data tab, and then we're gonna go to the right to the forecasting. I'm gonna do this what if analysis. So what if, and then I'm gonna go to the goal seek, and we'll get this little display box, and we're gonna say I want to set this cell right there. I want to set it to be, and I have to manually input this cell. I want it to be 150,000. And I want you to make that cell 150,000 by manipulating, testing out, changing this cell. So do whatever you, so let's read that again. I want this cell to be 150,000 by manipulating or changing that cell. Notice that it's not actually a formula. It's just basically a request. It's not really a formula that we're doing. And that's why the cursor doesn't need to be on that cell, right? The cursor's down here, could be on any cell. So then I'm going to say, okay. And then you can see it's just testing the numbers out, right? And then it finds the number, and there we go. There we have it. So that would make sense. So then the 150,000 would be this number plus the purchases minus this, and there's the 150,000. So just a useful tool to be using. So that's often what we have to do. We may have to think about in order to fill out the purchases and the detail for the cost of goods sold calculation. So now that we have that, I'm going to say, all right, the beginning balance from our equation was 60,000. And then we had purchases, and the purchases are 140,000. And then the ending balance, we said was 50,000. So there's the 50,000. Okay, and then if we go back over to our forms, back to the forms, there's our 150,000 remains the same, but now we have the detail, that detail calculated on the 1125. Here's our 1125. The beginning balance plus purchases, that gives us the cost of goods available, the 140 plus the 60, minus the ending inventory gives us that 150,000. Anytime I make any kind of change, I would basically go back in here and just double check that everything lines up. Am I still in balance, at least on page 5, schedule L? And we are still in balance, so it looks like we didn't mess anything up, and the 150 is still there, so everything lines up. We're good to go.